Hello, everyone. Welcome to Rash's World. Today we have a very special guest. We have Hollay Ghadery on Rash's World. How are you doing today?
Great, thank you.
So, how would you briefly describe yourself to our audience? And I know you're a woman with many hats and many colorful hats, but which ones would you like to tell us about now?
Wow, I would consider myself a nerdy little kid without a lot of friends. That's who spends
I
her
did not expect that, but that's
yeah,
good.
who spends a lot of my life with books.
Books.
That's
Yeah.
my person. That's who I am at my core without all of the extraneous labels placed on me.
Okay, well, here are my notes on you. Iranian-Canadian multi-genre writer. You're also a book publicist. You write different, again, multi-genre, like many different types. And today, the main focus I like to have is on Fuse, which is your memoir. Is it fictional or is it more like, would you say more like autobiographical, really like looking at it? Because your approach is very interesting. Just to look at that, it's not your conventional memoir, is what I'm trying to get at.
Yeah, it's a series of meditations on various points in my life and
That's it.
about the biracial identity and
Mhm,
how uh, being biracial carries with it certain joy pockets, like
mhm,
being mixed race biracial. I think a lot of us, who at least I've spoken to a lot of mixed race biracial people, have a lot of joy in their lives, and we get to be, uh, kind of in between spaces and mixed cultures as well. That's exciting, but there's also a documented prevalence of disordered eating and mental illness in biracial women specifically, which is a definite focus of the book.
mhm,
And it's
mhm,
set up as a series of, I think, 14 or maybe 15, I don't remember, meditations. So it's
mhm.
not really, you're not getting, I was born and this is where I am now. Uh,
That's what I
I
meant. Yeah,
know
it
more.
it
It's
had
just,
an interesting feel to it. You're just like
yeah,
you're thrown into situations. I love the term meditation. I think that really works here as a description.
yeah, I have to thank a reader or maybe an editor for giving me that term. I used to just call them personal essays. And somebody was like, well, these aren't really essays because they're stories,
Yeah.
but they're stories about my life. So it's completely autobiographical.
Yeah.
I'm not making anything up, but I also have to add that any story, any way of remembering anything is obviously a story, right? Like
Yes.
it's a narrative,
Yeah.
and it's how I remember
Mhm.
reality, but
Yeah.
it's a memory of a reality. And so I'm kind of
Exactly.
moving, I don't try to speak for other people in the book. I don't try to remember anything except what I remember. And even within my own memory, I question certain
Mhm,
things. And I'm like,
mhm,
I don't know. This is what I remember. I know I don't remember things the same way as my brothers. Like,
mhm.
I'm really trying to call attention to the fact that I'm really only speaking for myself here as I remember things.
Mhm. And there are serious issues that you're mentioning and talking about in your book again. Also, like womanhood, being a female, and being again of mixed races and so on. What are some of the complications that you'd like to mention here that makes it more difficult, and maybe like people who don't have that will not experience it in that way. So it really opens like a door into a different way of life, a different way of seeing the world, and also different kinds of suffering as well in that sense.
I thank you for the question. I really want to circle back to, like, I need to just speak for myself and my experience of being Iranian
Mhm,
and of British Isles descent.
mhm,
So that's my swirl, that's my mix.
mhm, mhm,
And people who have different racial swirls, biracial, mixed race people of different racial swirls, will have completely different experiences.
mhm,
But there is some commonality
mhm,
between biracial, mixed race people and especially women, and our experiences of never really belonging in one space or another. And
mhm,
that's really the nucleus of a lot of these pieces: a sense of
yeah,
non belonging, a sense of being pushed out of spaces, a sense of never being enough. And as it pertains to eating disorders, specifically, my experience with anorexia and bulimia and all kinds of different manner of disordered eating and addiction throughout my life, and how a therapist told me once that when she was trying to figure out what my family background was, and I said that my father is Iranian and my mom's white. She said, well, biracial women have a documented prevalence of eating disorders. And I kind
Mhm.
of just shoved that to the back of my mind. I was really hungover. I wasn't really interested in being where I was or talking to this person. This essay's in the book where I talk about all of this, but it was filed away in the back of my brain.
Mhm.
And later, I came back to that and started unpacking it and speaking with my who was at the time my present therapist about it, and there is, and about why mixed race biracial women tend to have a higher percentage of disordered eating and eating disorders. And it's really about being caught between different worlds, different expectations, different standards for beauty, all this stuff, than when you're just brought up with a more cohesive cultural identity. Like, I really didn't have a cohesive cultural identity.
But it resonates with me. I mean, caught between different worlds is what I refer to. I'm not biracial, but my son is now. But for myself, it was being born in Iran, but growing up in Germany. And
Mhm.
so my identity is kind of mixed in that sense. And so it's not something that people would see. My name is not German, and I don't look German necessarily, but that's my mentality too in many ways, and my culture, because I did grow up there. And
Mhm.
so, and that causes some confusion where, and also where you're not accepted in either on either side. You kind of feel like, you're a nomad, like in between these two places, and how to deal with that. But then there's also the benefit of like, well, I have two places to choose from. I can switch, right? It's like living in Montreal where I can speak English or French, and I know both, right? So I think that is also a benefit in many ways that many people don't have.
Exactly. I mean, you get to experience so much more when you're between cultures and between identities. And that's not always a bad thing. I think when it becomes problematic is because we certainly live in a world where we can, at times, some more than others, feel pressured to justify and position who we
Mhm,
are
mhm,
exactly.
mhm. Yeah,
And
you're kind of boxed in many ways,
yeah,
right? Yeah.
and that can be really infuriating, especially for someone like me, because I am wholly Iranian, and I am wholly white, and I am not half of anything. I am wholly both things, and that math does not math with people
Yeah.
when they're trying to shove you in.
It's either or, that kind of thinking, right?
Yeah, and I've had people just like yourself say things like, "Well, I'm not Iranian, but I am Italian, and I grew up in Montreal,
Hmm.
and growing up in a conventional Catholic Italian strict family with, in a Western society, they they related to what I'm talking about, feeling torn, and they're not biracial. So I've
Hmm.
kind of broadened my
Hmm.
definition now when I talk about
Hmm.
this book to
Hmm.
also talk about bicultural identities, because yes, it
Hmm.
is about race, but it's
Hmm.
also about culture. And I think what I talk about in the book can really speak to people who at home are feel like they're supposed to be one thing, and then when they step out of the door and face the world, they have to
Yeah.
kind of code switch and be
Yeah.
someone else.
Yeah, in that sense, it's universal. I mean, I can totally, and that's why it resonates with me. And it's like also the idea of home, because I don't know. I don't know where my home is, right? I got various places, and I can go to any of those places. But I talked to someone who said like that actually can cause a lot of mental health issues because
Mhm.
you don't have a culture you're grown up in, and you have your nation and your people. For me, it's like pretty much I relate to everyone. I connect with everyone, regardless. And but that is again, there are two sides to it. But I've been really focusing on the positive side. It's like I can do many things in that sense. I can, like a chameleon, I can adjust to that by still being myself, but I can speak in German to someone, I can speak in French to someone, and so on. And I think that is so enriching in our lives.
Absolutely. And I think, there, like I said, there are so many positives,
Hmm.
but I can't remember who said it or what the stat is, but I remember hearing several times throughout my life from wonderful people. Anahad Dashtard, who's an Iranian, also the same scroll as me,
Okay.
Iranian and white, talking about how she wrote a great book called Bones of Belonging and Breaking the Ocean, two nonfiction books about identity and racial inequity and all this great stuff. And she talked about how, but I think it was her. So, if you're out there and I'm quoting you inaccurately, I'm sorry. Somebody said that belonging is people fear not belonging more than they fear death. And
Oh, okay.
if I
Yeah.
think about, my children coming home from school, I have 4 young kids, and they've had a squabble with a friend and they feel like they're on the outside. It is devastating to them.
Yeah.
That feeling of not having your people, and just seeing my children completely crumble and cry because nobody would play with them. Or I can remember feeling that way, hence what I said at the beginning, that I was a lonely kid with not a lot of friends. I may have said no friends, that's an exaggeration, but I'm an artist, I'm a writer, so that's what happened.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
exaggerate. But
Yeah. You're allowed to do that. Yeah.
I definitely had some wonderful friends, but I did not have a pile of friends. I was certainly not popular. I was labeled as being in the nerd herd. And it was not a positive thing. That definition was not something that was it didn't make me more popular, that's for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, and I can relate to standing out in that sense where it's uncomfortable because it was me and a Turkish girl in our school, in high school, and that's it. There were no other foreigners. So you do kind of feel like you're at odds with with others. You look different, your
Mhm.
language skills are different and so on.
Yeah.
But again, like I think when I look back, I think it was really helpful in despite all the suffering and the pain of really moving me forward in a different direction and also becoming more I don't know, more joyful and like having these like I appreciate those feelings. I look back not with anger but with a lot of joy and basically thank them for having me go through that in a
I
strange
think
way.
I know, I get it. I mean, I think what did they say, that adversity doesn't create character, it reveals it.
I like that.
And
Yeah.
yeah, I believe that, because it didn't make me stronger
Uh-huh.
going through this and feeling isolated and alone,
Mhm.
having kids in my elementary school pointing out that I had a big nose and why do I have facial hair and
Mhm.
stuff like that. I mean,
Mhm.
that was not positive. It led to me like
Mhm.
bleaching my lips, and I had a nose job when I was,
Mhm.
16, because I
Mhm.
wanted to not look as Iranian. Although, I've said this before, but having a nose job is like the most Iranian thing I could have done. Like,
Yeah.
it's like a cultural rite of
Yeah.
passage.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, so I definitely, there is that, but it has revealed a part of myself to me that was always very apparent as a child when I'd read books or spend time alone or maladaptive daydream, like just
Mhm.
do
Yeah.
whatever in my own head, is that I can find an inner source of equilibrium and strength
Mhm.
that's just from me. Like
Mhm.
nothing,
Mhm.
yeah, I don't necessarily need anyone to justify my existence and who I am all the time. And we all need that sometimes, but I've definitely had a little nucleus of identity in me,
Good for you.
like
Yeah.
revealed,
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
I can do this. And it's not to say that I don't need to be held accountable sometimes, or I can't learn from others. I am not an island in any way, stretch, or form.
Mhm.
I thrive on community, and I'm so glad I found a community of weirdos like me now.
Yes. Yeah,
Uh,
we do exist.
yeah, yeah, but I'm a little bit more self-sufficient and less
Yeah.
reliant on external, uh, justification for who I
Mhm.
am. And if somebody, doesn't, when I tell them that, when I get called ethnically ambiguous a lot,
Mhm.
just
Mhm.
like people can sometimes flag that I'm not quite white, but they're not sure what's going on there.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
so it also depends on who's looking at me, right?
Yeah.
Like, who, if a Middle Eastern person is looking at me, they can usually peg me as from
Mhm.
somewhere in that general area.
Mhm. Mhm.
Uh, but in any case, yeah, it's made me it's revealed that source of inner strength that was
Mhm.
always just somewhere I've had, and maybe wouldn't have been revealed to me had I been popular, which I don't think in any world would have been possible.
Mhm. Mhm. But it's also the title is fuse, so that is also positive. It's uplifting by fusing, like fusion when you mix Korean food with tacos, and they're actually really good, right?
Yeah.
I think that's great, and I also love your sense of humor that goes through it.
Mhm.
Drink until you're hot. I think that's a good mantra there too, and various others. There's like you can sense that there's a lot of life and passion within you, and I think that makes it the hard stuff. It makes it easier to deal with when you have that perspective too. You have access to that.
Yeah, yeah, that's, and I mean, I have to revel in my absurdity. One of the kind of OCD that I live with, and to be clear, like being mixed race or biracial, being bicultural, definitely was like a hothouse for
Mhm,
mental illness. But
mhm,
my, I was born neurodivergent. Like as a very young child, I was aware of
mhm,
the fact that I thought differently. And the kind of
mhm,
OCD that I live with is existential OCD, which is a kind of OCD that's very fixated on questions
mhm,
of existence and mortality and, time, and not in any like spiritual. I mean, yes, it is spiritual, but it's actually terror. And so, about as being 3 years old and realizing what the end game of life was, and
okay.
that
Yeah.
everybody I love is not going to be here one day. Like that is terrifying. So as I've gotten older, one of the ways I've learned to live with that after I stopped waterboarding my emotions with vodka and got sober, one of the reasons that I a way I've learned to deal with that very well is through humor and
Yeah.
absurdity.
Yeah.
Because if I don't laugh, I'm going to cry.
Yeah.
And I have to find another way to deal with that in humor and re-enchanting myself with the world and finding, as I said earlier, like little joy pockets is
Yeah.
what keeps me going, keeps me sober, keeps me all of these things that make me a semi-functioning adult.
Yeah. I can relate to that. Maybe I think I was going through the same thing because I was a teen and I was reading Dostoevsky and Kierkegaard and Tolstoy. And I remember like starting Tolstoy's War and Peace was like, I hope I get to the end before I die. And this is like, 14-year-old thinking that. So in many sense, but that is so rich too, because it led me to the path of philosophy and like being curious about literature. And I want to talk about your what you call pathological love of literature and how that relates to your existence basically, and how that's also a form of therapy too.
Well, I think that dropping into a wonderful book, whether it's poetry or fiction or nonfiction,
Hmm.
graphic novels,
Hmm.
whatever, I
Yeah.
think that uh, dropping into these different worlds and these different experiences, it nurtures a sense of common humanity, and it also helps develop empathy
Hmm.
for different perspectives and
Hmm.
different people, different ways of living.
Hmm.
I know that we just got through the election now, and I definitely am hearing a lot about people being happy, people not being happy. And my main thought is, God, I wish some of these people read more. um, I mean, on a lot of levels, I wish people read more, but I wish people realize that there is more that unites us than divides us, and
Hmm.
focusing on the things that divide us is,
Hmm.
it's profitable in this
Hmm.
capitalistic society. It's
Hmm.
profitable to focus on
Hmm.
divides, and it's good
Hmm.
for politics to divide people, but
Hmm. Hmm.
on a soul level, on a
Yeah.
happiness level,
Hmm.
it's not so good.
Hmm.
And I think that reading can remind us, and that there is more that unites us than divides us. You can read a character, Wayne Ing. He wrote a book. He's a Ottawa author. He wrote a book called The Family Code. Wayne is a Chinese man, wrote it from the perspective of a white woman whose son is and children are being taken away from her, and her son might be taken away from her because she is an abusive parent. Now,
Hmm.
this is not a sympathetic character
Hmm.
at all. But by the end of the novel, Wayne, who's a social worker, has us rooting for her, has us rooting for the mother, because we see how, yes, she is doing terrible things, but she is also a victim of a broken system. Like it's a circle
Hmm.
repeating
Hmm.
itself. So
Hmm.
it's not that I liked her by the end of the novel, but I at least was hoping for the best for her. And
Hmm.
I mean, there's probably no other world where you could have said, yeah, look at this person, you're going to have sympathy for her.
Yeah.
But book made me do it. you
Yeah,
know?
because that's the amazing thing. You enter, like, empathy is really important for when you look at especially fiction, I think, because you're
Mhm.
entering a character and we don't have access to other people's thoughts and emotions. Usually we get what they tell us, but they could be lying. And I found out that people lie, which kind of like I was like shocked to see that. But with a book, it's like you dive into that character and you see the world through their eyes. And I
Mhm.
think that is again what we mean by empathy. We don't usually get that, except we just have our own perspective, right? It's
Mhm.
limited to that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
like this person who I'm reading about. I mean,
Hmm.
not just Hannah in the family code, but this person who I'm reading about in good writing, good literature. I mean, there are terrible books that don't do this well, and we have no sympathy
Sure.
for the characters, but good writers, good books, all these things, when we can see a different perspective through their eyes or
Hmm.
read a poem that cracks open some inside part of ourselves and
Hmm.
releases that unsettles us or delights us or just makes us take one of those deep diaphragm belly breaths right
Hmm.
into the bottom of our bones on a cellular level. I mean, there's nothing better than that, and that's why I say I'm pathological about books and about literature, is because I mean, to me there is nothing greater than living in honor of and support of inclusion and ideas,
Hmm.
and that goes towards my parenting style
Hmm.
and everything. I mean, I want my kids to have their own ideas. They don't need to be carbon copies of me. And trust me, we do not agree on everything
Yeah.
at all. I mean, I am
Yeah.
raising teenagers down to 7 years old. I mean, we don't
Yeah.
agree on a lot sometimes,
Yeah.
but I don't need them to agree with me. I just need them to try to understand me and me to try to understand them.
Yeah, as a father, I have that too with my son. He's 16 now, and I always taught him to think for himself and to reason and so on. And at one point, I was like thinking, why have I done this? Because he's now criticizing me. It's like I've created a monster. But I mean, that's a wonderful thing because he is his own self, his own views, and he's not afraid of criticizing me. With I mean, growing up in an Iranian family, that's you don't do that. It's
You
like
do not.
you do not do that. Yeah.
Yeah, and I
Yeah.
mean, one of the stories I talk about in the book, and like sometimes when I'm trying to describe it, I realize it sounds so silly, but it was really devastating to me. Is my grade 8 graduation, I got a dress. Actually, I don't
Mhm.
even know if I included this in the book. Maybe it got cut. I got a dress and I really loved it, and my father did not.
Mhm.
And because my father did not, I had no say in it. I didn't even know he did not like it when I showed it to him. And my mother went out and got me another dress he approved of, and I was forced to wear that dress. And I remember sitting in the corner of my room crying. Now, on one hand, I'm sitting here thinking, God, Hollay, how dramatic could you be? But it wasn't about the dress, it was about feeling betrayed and about not having myself and what I wanted honored. Because I
Mhm.
can look back in my mind and remember both dresses, and I mean, the best dress I wanted was beige. You don't put olive skin in beige, right? Like it was a bad choice. And I
Okay.
will admit that. It was,
Okay.
but what my father had the problem with is it was above the knee.
Okay.
And it wasn't actually form fitting. It was like this was the 90s. It was like a t-shirt dress, but it was above the knee, and I was wearing like strappy sandals that, did up around my ankles, and that was not it for my dad. And so I can look back objectively and say I probably looked better in the dress my parents picked, but that was not the point. The
Hmm.
point was that I was not allowed to be myself and make my own choices, and I didn't have autonomy over my own body.
Hmm.
And that's what bothers me.
Yes. Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
That makes it more difficult. Yeah. Really
Yeah.
finding yourself and
Yeah.
being yourself. Yeah. I want to switch over to poetry because you have a book of poems, a collection of poems, a Rebellion box. So again, the rebellion is there. That's cool. And there are two poems, and I think you might think it's weird that I like them or maybe not. I liked Run on page 11. I thought I really enjoyed that, and I was wondering if you can read it here for us because we have the author, the poet herself here, and also secondly, then as a second one, Aperophobia. I don't know if I pronounce this correctly, and that's page 35. Yeah.
Thank you for giving me the pages because I'm like, I don't know where they are. Um,
So Run
yeah.
is page 11. Yeah.
Yeah.
Could you
Perfect.
briefly read us? Yeah.
Apirophobia. Okay. So I will, yeah, do run first.
Cool.
Run. Realizing I'm weeks late, we run to the pharmacy 5 minutes before closing to buy a test. The cashier asks if we want her to double bag it, and you say, no. You say, that's what I should have done.
Yeah. I love that because there's that sense of humor, but it's also the multi-perspective. It's not
Mhm.
just one perspective, it's like various, right? And of a situation. Yeah. So
Yeah,
yeah.
thank you. Thank you.
Yeah.
That was it was one of those lines that, sticks with you. And
Yes, it did. It did.
decades later, it made it into a book of poems.
And I'm glad it turned into a poem that it inspired it.
Well, I mean, I'm a multi-genre author. Not everything needs to be a story, so
Right.
it was
Yeah.
it was easier to write about there. But yeah, appear phobia.
Mhm.
You'll learn about galaxies, of how you have infinite life to live, how old you are by observing the energy you radiate into space. In space, you'll require no air or substance to carry you along, but along you'll go, a compressed calm of calm compression, radiating through emptiness, though emptiness is a dream for a swollen universe, and the universe is a future that's dying of loneliness. Because you prefer the past, it's predictable, and in it you have infinite life to live.
Yeah. I really like that.
The book. Beautiful
Mhm.
cover art by Canadian novelist and artist Camilla Gibb. Oops, there we go.
Mhm. Mhm.
There we go, right there.
Wonderful. Yeah. So I had to look up what that is actually, apeirophobia, and it fits really beautifully with what you're saying, like the fear of infinity, which is a very abstract kind of fear, but it exists and it does affect us in many ways. And also like how you're kind of looking at the past. And so as like somebody who again my podcast on mental health, health and wellness and so on, it's like one thing that I learned and through actually literature, through The Great Gatsby. Yeah,
Mhm.
you can change the past. You can, right? Which is like, it's not as fixed as we think it is. Once you shift your perspective, it's like, oh my God, yeah. So this was different. Or how I remembered it is one way, but I could have remembered it in another way. And you're changing your past, and with it, your present, and with it, your future.
Absolutely, yeah. And I mean, it's one of the reasons I love like BBC period dramas and stuff like that. Is that
That's pretty cool.
because of my existential dread and
Mhm,
worrying about so much, I find the past is someplace I can live. Like I
mhm,
can live in movies set in the 1800s because I wasn't even born yet. I have all this life to live when I focus on the past. And
mhm,
whenever I get freaked out by this idea of infinity, I tend to go into the past. And
mhm,
but what you just said about, changing the past, I mean, that's why I'm very glad that I wrote Fuse
mhm,
when I was a parent. Because if I had written that book, and a few of the sections of it were written before I was a parent, which were rewritten after I became a parent, because with that perspective of being a parent, like I said about the dress, I could have empathy for what my
mhm,
parents were trying to do. Now, should my parents have told me, like gone behind my back and not even told me I couldn't wear the dress, but just presented me with another dress? No. I
mhm,
should have been talked to. I should have been treated like a human being. I get the fact that in grade 8, I was not an adult, but I am a fully
mhm,
formed human being, and I deserved
mhm,
some kind of exchange on that. But I can see that maybe the dress wasn't flattering and they
mhm.
thought there might be a better option for me. And that was a discussion that could have been had.
Yes,
You know what I mean?
but that's the power of empathy because
Yeah.
you're switching your perspective of something that happened in the past, and it's like, wait a minute, maybe I'm not as upset and angry as I thought I was, you know? And I think that's that shift. And I just like in a previous podcast, I talked about earthquake, how it's earth-shattering, but it's also groundbreaking. So
Mhm.
it's like it opens up a new way of living, of seeing things, and again, in many ways of healing.
Exactly. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. So, I mean, I do have empathy for my parents. Like, I still think things could have been dealt with differently. But I also like I think one thing that we have difficulty doing, and sometimes I do too, but I'm working on it, is like seeing that two completely opposite things can be
Yeah,
true at the same time.
yeah, yeah.
Like it doesn't there's not just one truth. Like there can be multiple equal truths. And people seem to have trouble holding that in their head
Yeah,
sometimes.
exactly. It is tough, but it is so important, and we have to have empathy. I think that's like a more imperative. We have to have it. We have to have hope, and all of these things are so important. They're not negotiable, right? But it's tough. It's tough. I mean, yeah, I'm not sugarcoating it, but I think it's necessary. It's important.
I agree absolutely, and I think developing empathy in our children and each other, as we age, means it's never too late to develop empathy is so important, and it's as easy as picking up a book. You know,
Yes.
you don't even have to talk to people to do it if you find people exhausting.
Yeah, exactly.
Start with a book, and then maybe
Yeah.
work your way up to talking to an actual person.
That's a good plan. That's a good
Yeah.
plan. Thank you so much, Hollay Ghadery, for being on Rash's World. So again, I want to remind everyone you're an Iranian-Canadian multi-genre writer. Now you have poetry, Rebellion Box. You have a collection of short fiction, widow fantasies. You have, oh, there we go, yes. And you have a novel, The Unraveling of Ooh. Is that correct?
Ooh, yeah, the ooh being the Persian pronoun for he and she.
Okay. And a children's book as well. So again, really like crossing many genres, Being with the Birds.
Yes, it's
That
about
sounds fascinating.
falconry.
Okay, well, falconry, awesome. Okay, cool. Thank you so much. And again, of course, Fuse, your memoir. Thank you so much for sharing your thoughts, ideas, insights here with us. I also want to remind people that you're a book publicist, and I have two of your clients, two authors here that were amazing, Molly Peacock and Linda Trin, and just love having them. And thank you for that. And thank you for being on Arash as well today.
Oh, I'm so happy. Thank you, Arash, for this platform and for everything you do to make the world a uplifted place.